Yes.
Like, I think this is why in the Hunger Games, the whole Katniss thing is ultimately a bit disappointing, because she's, like, bland protagonist, is against evil empire.
In love triangle
Love
with brooding goth and generic everyman.
Yeah, and you're like, this is just awful.
It really is. I would write if I wanted to kill myself.
And it's terrible because, like, people are like, oh, you know, but it's deeper than that. And, like, it's actually secretly about, like, it's anti-reality TV.
Secretly?
And you're like, yeah, but does it even make a good argument against reality television?
Does it even make a subtle argument?
No, because people are like, oh,
blatant.
it's against, like, the exploitation of people for entertainment. And you're like, yeah.
Duh.
And yet, like, the Hunger Games was the most interesting part of the books. And then they did it twice, and then in the third book, where they decided not to do the Hunger Games, it was boring as hell. So in a way, it's like saying reality TV will make really boring things somehow interesting, which is not an argument against it.
The meta-narrative doesn't hold up at all. You're absolutely right. The only interesting part of the Hunger Games is the Hunger Games. It's a very well-named series.
It knows what it's about.
The core conceit of the Avengers is that the Avengers must assemble, and all the bad guys are arguing the Avengers can't assemble. Very good meta-narrative, because the villains are people who don't believe in the movie. The Hunger Games is primarily about how entertaining the Hunger Games is, and how this book needs to stop being entertaining by ending its own suffering. What I'm saying is it's the exact opposite of the Avengers.
Yeah, because it's kind of like this weird meta-narrative of like, oh, you know, this is so terrible. And these people...
enjoying this book.
And it's like, you too are enjoying other people's suffering. And you're like, oh, should I stop reading the book? And it's like, no, buy part 2.
God, is the Hunger Games just one big cuck?
How
much of a perv was the author in real life?
I think it's like an anti-cucking, though.
No, it sounds like, it's like, oh, you're so naughty for reading this book, so much exploiting the underclasses. Like you, big boy.
You fuck.
Fuck you.
What other, there must be other stuff that's not Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, or Avatar The Last Airbender. What other media have we consumed?
What is not Avatar The Last Airbender? It's the only good part of fiction, Rachel. You know, I'll talk about Stormlight Till the End of Time or Homestuck. Is it finally the segue to Homestuck?
It's weird because, like, House has...
hard edges. Or is a mess of hard edges, loosely masquerading as a man.
Yeah, like, he's not afraid to be kind of, like, unrelatable, but actually when you dig down into it, he doesn't really have opinions.
No, he's just kind of a dick.
His opinion is, like, anti-authority, even when being anti-authority doesn't kind of make sense.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm smart, and I'm against the establishment, and people are like, no, House, you cannot do the thing, and he's like, I'm going to do the thing, and they're like, oh, you, so, House.
This totally sounds like a Family Guy setup.
But yeah, House tricks you into thinking he's an active protagonist because he has so much personality that you assume that he has goals, but he actually doesn't.
Kind of like Iron Man or James Bond. Really having good hobbies is an excellent and functional substitute for having an arc.
It really is. Like, instead of actually having an opinion about things, you can just be interesting.
Yeah, do interesting things with your life. Have hobbies.
James Bond is a great example of that.
He really is.
Where you're like, oh, he wants things. He really does. Like, well, he's like an old-fashioned English gentleman who wants women and sports cars and good wine. But, like, when you actually think of, like, what does he want to achieve?
Yeah.
It's, like, not whatever the bad guy wants.
His description is kind of funny man whore masquerades as bland protagonist for his day job.
Yeah.
But refuses to stop whoring during his day job. Yeah, I wonder what the line is between having hobbies as a substitute for being interesting. Maybe having hobbies is just what interesting is.
Well, but I think that it's
whether or not fantasy.
Whether his hobbies actually influence the plot. Like, you could have, theoretically, a James Bond movie where James, you know, treats women respectfully and he drives, like, a nice, suitable Toyota Corolla and he, like, wears, like, I don't know...
Functional Crocs.
Functional, like, Crocs and socks. And you're like, I was about to say it would be a much worse movie, but that actually sounds really funny.
As an anti-Bond movie, it's funny. If someone ever tried to do it sincerely, my God, it'd be garbage.
It'd be awful, but,
they'll probably cast him as, like, fat.
It wouldn't... like, actually change the plot of the movies. Like, he could still foil Blowfinger without having sex with everyone.
Blowfinger.
Blofeld, sorry.
I totally believed it was Blowfinger.
I think it was Goldfinger and Blofeld turned into Blowfinger.
I think what makes him interesting from his hobbies is his hobbies give him a characterization. You can know the person who has fancy suits, cigars, and is constantly whoring in a self-deprecating way.
Yeah.
Which means it's interesting because whenever he does something, you have an idea of how he'll do it. He has a personality.
Yes.
You know how this person solves problems. And like a joke with a setup, it means you can either subvert if it's uninteresting, or that's just foreshadowing if it's going to do something interesting anyway.
Yeah.
Which is build up to the satisfaction of him doing the interesting thing.
Yeah.
Which in most cases is saying something lewd and doing something awesome.
Yeah, no, you're right. I like that of being like, having a protagonist, even if he's not active, having him have a particular personality helps the audience feel like they're in on the joke. And they're like, oh, you know, James is probably going to do something that involves, like, running and shooting at things, because that's who he is.
Yeah, I don't think it's in on the joke, it's just knowing where the plot will go. You have expectations.
Sorry, I don't mean in on the joke as in, like, it's literally a joke, but more like, it's nice for the audience to understand that there's setup.
Yes, absolutely.
It's like setup and punchline.
But it has to be good setup. I
Yes.
know Luke Skywalker vaguely. And I'm like, God, is he going to whinge or is he going to mope?
Is he going to
What?
whinge or is he going to slash at things ineffectively with his glowing stick?
I sure can't wait to find out. Whereas the ultimate example of this is probably the trickster archetype, where the expectation in every situation is he'll do something unpredictable.
Yeah, which is really fun.
Yeah. Aang fits that quality well. He's fun to watch fight, because you know he's not going to do it directly.
Yeah. That's a really good point. Maybe that's why people enjoy tricksters so much, is because they have all of the comfort of the familiar, of he's going to do the unexpected.
Yes. Something whimsical and nonsensical.
I mean, like, villains are just fantastic, and they're so much fun to write and to act because they can have stances and be fun, and you don't have to worry about alienating the audience because they're supposed to be against them.
Honestly, I still don't think you should worry about alienating the audience from your protagonist.
I think
Just have them be an interesting person to watch do things. I know people who like Code Geass and they don't like Lelouch.
That's true. And, like, even we've got friends who, like, don't like Iron Man, but still like Iron Man the movie.
Let's be real. We have friends who don't like it. We know who you are. No one agrees with you.
Yeah, maybe people should, I would love to talk to, like, a studio bigwig or, like, whoever they do get to do their market research and be like...
making these choices.
Well, yeah, but to see, like, if there's actual good data, just because you and I are being like, oh, you know, you can totally have, like, a Marvel movie and the guy has a particular stance and people will still like it and watch it. And then they might come out and be like, actually, we've got data to the contrary.
You're fucking weird and you appeal to a niche of overanalyzers.
Yeah.
Possibly. And it is lovely having a relatable, cool protagonist. They're always good, as long as they're not boring relatable.
Although I wonder if there's maybe going to be a mix-up where they'll be like, no, we've tried to have characters with a personality before. Look, we had this character who was a woman, and people hated that personality. You're like, being a woman isn't a personality type.
They're like, no.
They're like that she was both gay and a woman. And you're like, neither of those are personalities.
I don't think you really can trust a team so much as you can trust directors or specific artists can know what they're doing. Like that weird obsession where pirate movies are out and then cowboy movies are in and then historical dramas and you're like, none of you know what...
Yeah.
This is just like the set dressing. None of it mattered.
Yeah,
The myth of the cowboy was not what people were going to the movies for.
It's true. It's like when they were like, oh, Lord of the Rings is popular. That means people love high fantasy. And you're like, no, people liked Lord of the Rings because it was... one, a pretty good book, and two, like, very, very well done movies. Just, like, in the core of the craft. Like, everything was expertly done.
Yeah. I think that's something you only really get from having a very strong understanding of storytelling rather than market research, which will just misdirect you.
But, like, you know, we make fun of big studios being like, pirates are in. But at the same time, I think there are... truths that, like, people enjoy certain parts of storytelling and they don't like it when those things don't happen.
True.
And, you know, thinking of the broad strokes of Game of Thrones, people don't like it when it feels like nothing mattered.
That's true for everyone all the time. I don't think that was a revelation.
And you're like, oh, it turns out that all these things that had, like, a big setup and, like, a just
Yep, there was no payoff.
There was no payoff. It didn't mean anything. No one's actions amounted to anything. It was all terrible.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true.
But then you could say something similar of like, maybe there is a truism that people like the protagonist that everyone can kind of see themselves in. Yum.
People must have very weird self-perceptions to see themselves in these people.
I know, it's weird because like when people are like, oh, do you identify with people? I'm like, no, there was no one like me. Only me.
Only Monica.
There are no people like me. There's just me.
I feel like that's more of a task better suited to video games where you actually can be the protagonist.
Yeah, but even then, like, it's the more you try and make people be able to actually have their protagonist have opinions about things, the harder it is to write the game and the more it kind of falls apart at the seams. Like, people like the Walking Dead Telltale games. And, like, I played those, but, boy, did they fall apart. Like, I even had, like, this whole decision tree where, like, I think there was this one guy who was, like, angry redneck.
I remember him. Daryl?
Something like that. And every one of my interactions with him was like, I agree with you. I'm going to support you, crazy bastard. And then, like, there came a point where he's like, fuck you, you never support me. I'm like, I do. But it was like, you couldn't actually, like, that looked like it was a path that you could take where you're 100% on his side, and it just wasn't.
True, if you go for, like, big overarching narratives or interpersonal relationships, it's hard to extrapolate out, because you can't write every path.
Yeah.
I also think it's probably the wrong way to go about it.
Yeah.
I'm thinking more of something like Dark Souls, where you can still have a lot of personality to your journey, even though there's no dialogue and all of the major character actions are you being stabbed. But the way you choose to go about your stabbing says a lot about you and how you confront and engage with this world.
Yeah, and like, because I was about to say, like, only you do that, Charles. Like, but actually, no, Fashion Souls is definitely a thing.
Fashion Souls is definitely a thing, and people approach challenge in different ways.
True, but like, for me, I found the whole world of Dark Souls incredibly lonely, and that's why I don't really like the games, is I'm like, yeah, these are fun,
lonely.
But like, it's a very lonely, very bleak world, and I don't feel like I have a connection with any of the characters, because none of the characters have connections with each other.
They keep laughing at each other.
They're just like, ha ha ha, I am insane, ha ha ha.
I don't know, I felt a connection to Siegmeier.
Whereas, like, I loved Kingdom Hearts, because you're like, it felt very, like, interconnected, and like, all the characters had very deep emotional connections to each other.
They did. But it always ends the same way in Kingdom Hearts. I don't think there's any room for a self-insert in-game, because you complete the sandbox in the allocated order. The only effect you have is on gameplay, not narrative. Yeah. And the gameplay doesn't affect the narrative, which is why
really
you can not the point of video games.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I was like, and so maybe it's a good thing of like, if you can watch the movie of a video game, then you probably haven't exploited the video game medium to do what it is best at.
Yes.
At the same time, that's not to say there aren't video games that are like that, where I'm like, I loved Kingdom Hearts, the movie game. This was fun.
It was. It's a good movie. And they were fun games.
Yeah.
They're gratifying and they have nice sound effects.
I think it's just, there are so few video games that are actually video games, you know? Like, so many of them are movies or books trying to masquerade as a video game.
True. I feel like Dark Souls really is just the example of a video game.
I'm trying to think, like, does, not whatever it is. I suppose Undertale?
Undertale is a huge example.
What about something like, what's the Insect Knight? Hollow Knight.
I'm not sure. Dark Soulsian storytelling. Yeah, I mean, you can really make your own world and adventure, I suppose.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking that I need to pee.
Go pee.
Hold on. Not Final Fantasy X, even though it's a great story and fun gameplay.
Oh, it's absolutely a movie.
Oh, it's so much fun. It's more just a good story that happened to have been stapled to an also good video game.
Yeah, medium video game.
Yeah, I like it. It was fun.